and so I'm very excited to have you here. I think that you've seen the work that we've done in Los Angeles, and the City Council approved our resolution to support the Marshall Plans for Mom, because we stand with you, and we think this, the advocacy of the work that you're doing is so incredibly important. Women have lost now almost 5 million jobs since the pandemic began, with about 2 million dropping out of the workforce entirely. This is affecting women of all backgrounds, but particularly women of color. And if you look at the statistics, 1 out of 4 women who reported becoming unemployed during the pandemic will tell you that it's because of the lack of childcare. And that's twice the rate of among men, to be honest with you. And so I wanted to invite you here and have this conversation. I guess I can start with asking you, how is it going on the East Coast? I know we're on opposite sides of the country. You're in New York and I'm in California. So I wanted to thank you, and I want to just have you say a few words before we can just dive in and just have a conversation, among friends.
Well, first of all, one of the most exciting things since we've launched the Marshall Plan for Moms is when I saw your flyer that you were introducing a resolution in the LA City Council. We all just freaked out because we were so excited to just see the organic leadership. And then I think I DM'd you, or I was
yes,
hey,
you did.
Can you send me that cool flyer that you did?
We were so excited. My staff was jumping up and down when you DM'd us. I'm like, oh my God, she saw it. So yeah, of course we had to get it to you right away. That was funny.
I'm so excited. So thank you so much for your leadership. And it just is such a testament that when women lead, and when we have women leaders like you that are that are in elected office, that are leading on these issues, our voices get heard. And I think because of your leadership, I think so many mothers feel seen. So I just want to thank you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. And thank you for being a voice for so many of us. And I think you've come up with an incredible platform of what we've all been talking about collectively, whether it be in our living rooms or maybe at the local bar when we're getting out of work, or we get together for a birthday party, about how exhausting it all is. Even before the pandemic, we were talking about how incredibly difficult it is to juggle all these different responsibilities that kind of society puts on women. But for you, I mean, what is your life, your everyday life look like? I know we talked about your husband was helping you put the kids to bed. It's now past 8 p.m. and on the East Coast, but as a working mother, a founding board member, a published author, I mean, inspirational speaker, how does the life of Reshma look like every day trying to juggle all these different titles?
It's exhausting. This morning I woke up at 5:30 a.m. I have a 13-month-old who's teething, and got up as if he was being murdered. And so a lot of my mornings start with my baby side and feeding him, and then I get a little bit of time. We do a little bit of a slow dance in the morning, either to some Indian Hindi music or some Bollywood music or some Lady Gaga or even some gospel. And then I put him back to bed and I walk the dog and I take a shower and I get my 5-year-old, or my 6-year-old up. You were just asking me, we're still hybrid learning. So either if I'm lucky, I'm walking him to school, or my husband's taking him to school, or, I'm getting him dressed and getting him fed so he can get on his first, Zoom meeting at 8:30 in the morning. I try to get a quick workout in. I realized, especially this year, I got COVID-19. I had all these liver issues. I mean, all of us, right? Our health is just broken down. Right. And so I know for me, I've just committed myself to at least spending 35 to 45 minutes just taking care, right, of me. And then I'm working, whether it is raising money for Girls Who Code, leading a staff meeting. Right now we are planning our Mother's Day campaign, which I will get you involved in when we announce what we're doing. I'm talking to a group of women in India because there's a global conversation that's happening around unpaid labor. And so there's a bunch of movements that are happening around the globe, because I think so many women, have seen, and so many people have seen, the burden that we bear as mothers in terms of the time that we do doing housework, doing homeschooling, taking care of our children, all the while, for some of us, we're trying to maintain full-time jobs. One of the other things that we've been really talking about this week is that one of the things that we're not talking about, and I'm so excited because we have so many Girls Who Code clubs in LA, and so many girls of color have gone through our program. And one of the things that we've seen this past year in the pandemic is how their education has suffered because they're taking on caretaking responsibilities. So for a lot of our students, right, they have mothers or had to go on the third shift or taken on unusual hours. And because school is either not open or sporadic, they're then taking care of their younger siblings, which oftentimes is making them not able to like log on to their school. And so, talking to different reporters about getting this story out there too, because as a country, we focus a lot about letting girls learn across the world, and how do you reduce their caretaking responsibilities or their housework. But we are actually dealing with that same crisis here in the United States, and we're not talking about it.
Yeah. I often talk to moms. I think that the moms who usually are at any given food giveaway that I host in the district, or a diaper giveaway that I host in the district, and so many of the conversations that mom have with me, especially monolingual speaking mothers, I think there's also sort of culturally you're raised not to complain, and you're raised to sort of fit this sort of like not a perfect model, but sort of like this is what women do, and we're just raised to have to take care of everyone. And I think for the women that I often interact with on some of these food lines, they are emotionally exhausted and don't have the freedom to I'm not talking about complaining, I'm just talking about venting and asking for help. And so have you heard from women? I know this has impacted women from all walks of life, but are you hearing from any particular ethnic group in terms of how they're dealing with this pandemic and what needs to be done to alleviate this sense of responsibility, almost guilt, that you can't really even talk about or vent about some of the expectations that are put upon us are just so unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think about my mother. My parents came here as refugees with nothing, and they didn't speak the language. My father would go to Toastmasters to get rid of his accent so he could actually get a job. They had no friends, no family, like nothing. And, back then they would pay like $50 a week, right, for our childcare. And at some point they couldn't afford it anymore. And we became latchkey kids probably by the time we were 7 or 8 years old. And I often think about my mother at this moment and what she wouldn't have been able to they wouldn't have been able to survive. And I think so many of the moms that I talk to, especially the immigrant mothers and the mothers of color, they're just being asked to do unreasonable things and sacrifice their own health for their children, because you'll always put your children first before you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we talk about these numbers, right, 2.4 million women losing their jobs, our labor market participation at where it was in 1989, who are these women? What were their hopes? What were their opportunities? Like most immigrants, like we are, like we're hustlers. And so I've met moms who were studying to get their nursing degree while they were Uber driving, you know what I mean, and working, at a grocery store. But then all of that had to be put aside because they had to homeschool their children. And so what are all the dreams and the opportunities and the hopes that have been lost in this moment? Mothers who've had to move into their cars or be
Mm-hmm.
homeless, or move in with their parents. There's so much suffering. And you're right, we never complain. Never
Mm-hmm.
complain. Because in many ways, we're taught to just sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Hope and pray that things will actually get better, but not ask for help. And I think what really resonated with the Marshall Plan is women said, yes, I should get paid leave. I shouldn't have a child and then go back to working at Target or Walmart the next day. I should have affordable childcare that doesn't take 70% of my salary. Like, if we are in a country, in a nation that basically respects and values children and women, why aren't I getting anything and any
Right.
benefit, support, any help? And I think the recognition that has been so powerful for me as I've talked to women across the globe is this is a distinctly American phenomenon, right? In other countries, like in Norway, when you have a baby, you get diapers and milk. They
Mm-hmm.
check in with you a week later, but you need a massage. I mean, can you imagine? Right?
I would
Like,
have loved a massage when I had
I would
given
love
birth.
that, right? Like, but it's not like that anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's like that here. And I think we have an opportunity to say, no, 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 no more, right? And, one of the things we were talking about our kids and being in hybrid in schools. And I think one of the things, Nury, that really scared me is that when we designed policy, when we designed a hybrid learning approach, or when we decided to close the schools, nobody asked us,
Mm-hmm.
Nury, Reshma, what are you going to do? What can I help? How are you going to do that? How are you going to log on your kid and keep? No one even asked, what do you need? How can we support you? Is this okay with you? And the fact that we were just not even seen is just is terrifying, right?
That is such a good point. You know, it reminds me because I created a small little, I don't want to say a small program, but it's the 50 of our neediest parks in Los Angeles. We created something called alternative learning centers. Because once we started to do the food pantries and the grocery giveaways and the diaper giveaways, a lot of the mothers who were coming to pick up their groceries and their diapers couldn't go back to work because they didn't have anywhere to send their kids to. So we took the parks and we created these distance learning centers. We must have spent like $30 million on investing in that. And every time I went to any of these parks to see how they were doing, you would see the moms drop off their kids at 8 o'clock in the morning, drop them off and say thank you, because since the schools are closed, to your point, no, a mom said to me, how did they think this was going to work? I need to go back to work. I'm lucky enough to still have a job to go to. And I cannot afford to stay home. I don't have that flexibility to be on a Zoom call, you know, all day long while my child is next to me. Like I got to physically go into my factory job to get it done. And so she was so thankful that she had her nearby park that served as a school, basically. I mean, we had all of our rec center folks helping the kids log on to school, because a lot of our kids at the beginning were not logging on because probably their parents were either at work or nobody knew how to do that at home. So we had a rec center person help them log on. We had a meal for them. We had breakfast, lunch, and a snack. And then the parents would pick them up after 4 o'clock in the afternoon after they got off of work. And we did that at 50 different parks. And that came from talking to parents and moms at a food pantry line who were asking, what are we going to do? When are schools going to reopen? Because I got to go back to work.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you.
I mean,
God bless you for doing that, right? But it's like,
but you're right. No one asked.
No one asked.
I mean,
yeah. No one asked. And the thing is that because of your background and my background, we saw this. And I think that, like, you know, if we think about 70% of low-income families are run by a single breadwinner who is a woman. So if she has to lose her job, the entire family suffers, and she knows that. And so she has got to figure out, right, what am I going to do to support my kids so I don't lose my job, because then we go on the street. And this is the problem when you have the vast majority of legislators, one who are men and two that are privileged, right? And they've never had this experience. They don't know anybody who lives this reality. So they can't even think. And, you know, again, I think they designed this policy of school around this kind of 1950 sensibility that there is a middle or upper class woman at home who's going to take care of the kids.
Mm-hmm. So I've been seeing families struggle for years. I think Los Angeles is an example of working families or working poor who are doing everything right. They get up early in the morning, they go to work, they come home, probably change clothes, and then hit the next job. They probably are holding 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to put food on their table. And we see families struggling day in and day out during the pandemic. What do you think you and I can do at a national level to really shed light on what working families are having to go through and what we need to do to keep them whole or keep them from becoming homeless? Because they're a paycheck or an emergency away from ending up on the streets.
I think we have to share these stories. Yeah. You know, I think we have to share these stories. I think we have to put a name to a face. And I think we have to also really fight for what are our ideals. Like, what does it mean to be American? Is this how we treat one another? Mm-hmm. I mean, we just went through this, you know, once in a lifetime global pandemic that uprooted our entire life. And if we're going to build America back better, we have to build motherhood back better. We have to build American families back better. I think the thing that's interesting, Nury, is some of this stuff isn't rocket science. And, you know, we know that's why I really argued for, you know, basic income payments for mothers. And I'm excited to see the child care tax credit, which is a cash payment to a parent that's not tied to actually work, right? And we've shifted the language from the 1980s, you know, about welfare to actually, you know, welfare to work, and that's the only way you should get a benefit, right? Because there are Black mothers back in the 1990s that were fighting for this, you know, and they were in the right fight. And then we lost our way. And so I think that we have an opportunity again to say, you know, when you put cash in the hands of families, they can decide what they need for them. It's not a one size fits all test. Someone may need to pay for the mortgage. Someone may need to pay for the rent. Someone may need to put food on the table. Someone may need to buy books, right? It's like, but giving them those resources and trusting them that they know what's to do, what's right for their families, especially mothers, is the right thing. And I think we have to shift that conversation kind of in that way. Childcare, like the data is very clear now that when you have early learning and you have support at an early age, you live longer, you make more
Mhm.
money, you're more likely to, go to higher education. And so every company should fully subsidize childcare, period, right? We shouldn't be having a conversation about paid sick days anymore. Like if people had paid sick days in January and February, far less of our Americans would have died. And
Mhm.
that's fact. So how do we learn from this past year and how do we use this as an opportunity? I think, Nury, part of the, what's interesting when I rolled out the Marshall Plan for Moms, I made the mistake of reading the comment section, in my op-ed. And some of the feedback was, and oftentimes from our Republican brothers and sisters, was that, well, mother is a choice. You
Mhm.
don't get anything because you chose, so you're on your own. And that is just that American individualism, rugged individualism, that's broken, and it's simply just not feasible. And, we had 300,000 less births this year. That is bad for our country. So, how do we put these arguments together? And I think, how do we push, how do we push this as a bipartisan issue? Because it's a family issue.
I think I couldn't agree with you more. Stop reading the comment section on anything. I mean, some of that stuff is so toxic. Sometimes I even think that part of social media can be very toxic. So I stopped reading that stuff a long time ago because we got to move forward. We get stuck in these comments and it makes me so angry. And responding just ends up in a whole different, you end up in that black hole. You'll never get out of it. So, but you touched on something that is very, very important to me, that it often feels like mothers get punished for being moms. And
Mhm.
so I remember going through pregnancy. I didn't have the best of times. I didn't necessarily enjoy pregnancy. But then once I had my baby, I had postpartum depression, which took me a really long time to even acknowledge and talk about because of a shame that's associated to that. But having to just feel like you have to choose between a paycheck and staying home and bonding with your child, or being physically and mentally well to be able to go back to work and resume a normal life, was so stressful to me. But
Yeah.
I often think that women get punished for wanting to bring life into this world. And
That's
that's how I think that society views it. So those comments that you were reading, well, motherhood is a choice. Well, who else is going to do it?
Yeah. And
You
it's kind of,
know,
and it's interesting. I mean, even if you think about some of these, like, tech companies, right? It's like they'll give you money to freeze your eggs, but why aren't you fully subsidizing my childcare then?
that's right.
Right? Like, how are these two different things?
That's
And I
right.
I think I think that's right. I think that we don't value motherhood in the way that we are supposed to, I think, in this country. And I think we as mothers are so exhausted and tired, right? Like the moms on my PTA, they're not marching for paid leave or affordable childcare because they're barely just trying to get through the day. And so, but we will march for climate. We will march for, against gun reform, and for gun reform. We will march for our children, but we think we're martyrs. And we've almost been taught to be martyrs and not to ask for things. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about too is, what does a Marshall Plan for Moms at Work look like? What is the opportunity to push, again, not just the big tech companies and the law firms and the hedge funds, but to put retail, education, I mean,
Mhm.
places where working families, where what are we demanding for them to do for mothers? What are the benefits that we're demanding that they provide now for mothers? And I think we have an opportunity, I think, to basically present, our demands, and because they can't survive without us. Like, let's be real.
Yeah. And what are you seeing in younger women? I often get an opportunity to talk to young women, or lately I've been invited on a lot of different Zoom conversations about women and women empowerment during Women's History Month in March. But are you seeing that younger women see themselves invested in this fight for equal pay, for paid family leave? Because I got to tell you, before the pandemic, I was out talking to a lot of industry folks in Los Angeles about adopting a citywide, Paid Family Leave Act. I mean, we have to. I think the city is now on its way to do that, but I think we need to do it across the city of Los Angeles. And a lot of the feedback that I was getting is that younger women don't see themselves having children right away. So it's something they see they can sort of postpone, or they don't have to think about it tomorrow. But you know, your 20s go by really quick, and then all of a sudden you're in your 30s, and then you're 35. Then the clock starts ticking, and you're going to have to make a decision whether you're going to have kids or not. So, are you seeing that when you're out there talking to women, particularly younger women, how they're seeing themselves, how they plan to at what age are they planning to have children these days?
I mean, look, so what was interesting, I think what happened in this pandemic and why it was a perfect storm was that the vast majority of mothers were between the ages of, I think, 35 and 42, 45, right? So I'm 45, my kids are 6 and 1, right? Like I'm an old mom, right?
Yeah, I'm 48. I had my daughter at 36, 37.
Right. We were at the height of height of our careers, and our children were incredibly young. And so that was just, again, this perfect storm. And I think that's why there's, again, been so many mothers who've been forced to kind of choose between their jobs and their children, or make these untenable choices. I think younger women look at us and like, oh, heck no, right? Right? I'm not having kids. And that's a problem, right? But it's also an opportunity, because so I actually think that we have to save motherhood. Like, I think motherhood is at risk in this country. And I think you've seen this by the declining birth numbers. So I actually think that and that's why I think there's in some ways an interesting bipartisan issue. It was interesting that Mitt Romney was the one who first was talking about the child care tax credit, because I think conservatives will say, yeah, actually, how do you make having a child more attractive? And you make it more attractive by paid leave, by affordable childcare, by basically, providing a tax credit, some of the things that other countries offer where they have birth rates that are skyrocketing, because government is there to actually support families. I think if we continue to say, you're on your own, you don't get anything, people aren't gonna have kids.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think they look at me, especially when there's women who want to run for office and they're trying to lay out the plan of what the next 10, 15 years look like. Children is not in the mix. And to be honest with you, neither is marriage.
Yeah.
A lot of women are waiting longer to get married, which I'm not opposed to either. But I think those are difficult decisions for women in particularly. Well, listen, running for office is, and you've ran for Congress in the past, and I think it's becomes dicey depending on whether you're with a significant other who's going to support you in doing that and taking that leap of faith and running for office, because you're oftentimes not around. But that goes to say for any other career woman who wants to be on that career path, or take their career takes them to other parts of the country and traveling and so on, and not being the conventional mom, does sort of make you wonder, like, what kind of partner do I want to support me in this?
Absolutely. I think that's right. And I think the most important decision I made was who I decided to spend my life with, because he is my biggest
right.
And I know that he's I can tag him in, right? But the other thing that's interesting is I think we grew up in a generation where you had to hide your motherhood, because if you were a mom, it was as if you were not serious about your career. And I had far too many of those conversations that you've had, which is like, I don't know if I want to run for office, but I want to have kids. I'm married, and it just depressed me. And so when I had my son, Sean, I took him everywhere. When I went on the Daily Show, Trevor Noah, there was Sean. When I was speaking at Commencement, there was Sean, right? I spoke at the National Governors Association, there was Sean, and it was messy. There was his puree all over me. I was sweaty. It was messy because motherhood is messy. But I think the signal that I wanted to show to the women who work for me was that you don't have to choose. And you can have it all, but it's not perfect. It's messy.
That's
and
right.
Part of what we need to do is shove our kids in everybody's faces and be like, this is my identity. I am a mom, and it is my favorite title. It is my biggest identity. But that means that y'all got to change. No, we got to change this to make it possible for us to do this. I think it's an enormous opportunity, in this moment.
I love your book, and I love the fact that you talk about imperfection like it's a normal thing. I think we're set up for failure the moment we try to romanticize marriage or motherhood or what it takes to be a career woman these days. It's all messy. my house is messy. You know, you're going to have leftover dinners for like 2 nights in a row. Deal with it. It's fine. And you do. I think that one of the most important things is finding that significant other that's going to support you no matter what. And I think that was definitely something that I'm very appreciative of my husband, is because he does understand and support me. He's my biggest cheerleader and a wonderful father. And I think I couldn't have asked for a better partner. But I want to dive into the Marshall Plan for Moms. And I think your leadership on this has been incredibly exceptional. And I just want you to help us walk us through it, because I want our viewers who are watching this to understand it and why it's so important to advocate for it on all platforms. If you're on social media, or we're actually in front of an elected official or your local representatives, and why we need to continue to push for these policies that are going to advance women in the workplace. And so I just want to just be able to give you the opportunity to lay it out, and then, you know, and then have a conversation. I do also have a number of folks that are asking questions, so I want to leave a little bit of room to be able to answer their questions as well.
Yeah. So, you know, I started 2020 with a newborn baby. 5-year-old. I run one of the largest women and girls nonprofits in the world, and I was going to take my maternity leave for the first time. And then COVID-19 happened, and I ended my maternity leave when my baby was a few weeks old, and I had to homeschool my 5-year-old, and I had to save my nonprofit, because when you have economic recessions, the first resources that go are to girls' education. And, you know, the year was incredibly tough, right? I got COVID-19 and it barely registered. My liver failed. I got acne on my face as if I was 16 years old, and I was barely making it. And when I looked on my Zoom screen, every mother looked exactly how I felt. And I think for so many of us, we're like, let's just grin and bear it. September's coming, schools will be open, and we'll get a reprieve. And then when schools didn't open, and again, all these male felt like legislators were making these decisions that were going to affect my life and didn't even ask me. And I saw what was happening with the numbers. I mean, we think about this. It's like we lost 2.4 million jobs. You know, our labor market participation is where it was in 1989. So 30 years of progress gone in 9 months. And if when you lose that many jobs that fast, it's not an on and off switch that you can just say, well, okay, when a year from now we'll be back to normal. It doesn't work that way. And again, I knew that from tech, right? Because in my day job, you know, what we forget is that in the 1980s, we were almost at gender parity in the technology workforce with women. And then we pushed women out as tech became more lucrative. And now we're basically at 25%. And so it's been so hard to get back to those gains. And so when I looked at what was happening, again, present day in terms of this job loss, I was like, okay, well, this is not good. Like, where's the plan? Someone's got to have a plan, right? Because you need a plan when you lose this many jobs. And there wasn't a plan, you know, not from anybody. And so I wrote the Marshall Plan for Moms as an op-ed, basically talking to my mom friends and my moms at the PTA and my moms, you know what I mean, at the grocery store, saying like, what do you need, right? To get back to work, or to, you know, to get back to life. And what I heard over and over again was, I need cash. You know what I mean? Like, I am having to make choices every single day because I don't have the resources, because I've lost income. You know what I mean? And I've had to go on the third shift, or I've had to, you know, like, and I need flexibility. I need cash. So I don't become homeless, or I don't move in with my parents, or I don't, you have to make these sacrifices. And so it felt like it was incredibly important to give moms money. You know, the second thing I heard was like, we need paid leave and we need affordable childcare. So much of the reason, what we learned was that for many people, schools was operating as childcare. Mm-hmm. And so when they shut down because they couldn't afford it, there was no alternative. And because it was COVID, you couldn't have grandma or auntie or your sister come in and provide support. So when you had a broken infrastructure in childcare, everything was gone. You know, the other thing that we learned was, again, schools opening safely 5 days a week. Moms were saying to me, like, I'm not waiting for a vaccine. I'm waiting for the schools to open. That's when my life changes. And, you know, finally, what I heard, you know, from women was, especially women, low-income women that were in jobs like healthcare, retail, you know, education. These were jobs that weren't pandemic proof, that were not going to come back. And because many of them were the sole breadwinners in their family, we needed a plan, a federal plan, to retrain them for the jobs of the future so that they can go back to being America's breadwinners, which was what they were when COVID happened. 51% of the labor force was female, right? when COVID first started. So those were the four tenets really of the Marshall Plan that I put out there. And, I do think that what ended up happening is it set the frame for the conversation of how we needed to talk about this, and then how we needed to develop a plan, to shorten women's economic recovery and get them back to work.
And so for women who are employed, how could the Marshall Plan for women, what can it do for them? Or for women who are not necessarily formally in the workforce right now, how can this plan help them?
Well, I think the first thing is I think a lot of women, especially women of color,
Mhm.
we have a lot of on and off ramps into the workforce. And we don't live in a structure or a society that allows for that, right? And so I think the importance of having a conversation on, you know, valuing unpaid labor is really important. So much of the conversation around equality was I would call lean in corporate feminism, right? And it basically was all about what you need to do to like move up the corporate ladder. But we never talked about the inequality at the home, nor what many single mothers faced, which are significant amount of moms in our country in terms of the resources that they needed to basically sustain their family. I think the
Yeah.
second piece of this, in terms of women who are in the workforce that didn't lose their jobs, I think when we start talking about what the new normal is, how is that going to affect you? When our kids lose a year of learning, let's be honest, Nury, they're broken.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to offer them support. We are not going to be able to just go back to where it was. And so what does remote work look like? What does flexibility look like? Do we push the private sector for the first time to offer full subsidies on childcare? How do we get rid of the motherhood penalty once and for all? Let's be
Mhm.
honest. When I'm on calls and every mom is being interrupted by their kids all the time, and my boss is not looking at me being like, gotta hire a mom. He's like, oh no, you know, I've seen your business. I've seen your messiness. And because we don't value motherhood, we don't think that now you're suddenly the type of employee that I want to
Mhm.
hire. So my inbox, Nury, is full of women who are being discriminated against because they're caretakers. They're being gaslit at work. They're not getting that promotions. They're getting their jobs cut. Women who are like, I need to take off an hour to go pick up my laptop
Yeah.
at my school are getting fired. And so this is happening across all income levels, across all industries, and there's no protections for that,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah,
think
those are really good points. Yeah.
another incredibly important um, thing that we need to basically start thinking about and start really like telling companies, our employers, I see you, and you can't do that to moms.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of questions from our audience. I'm getting some really fun questions here. So I'm going to go with the first one. Can you comment on the fact that most women across the U.S. do not have option to manage their own reproductive health and choices because the policies and because of the policies in Republican-run states?
Yeah, it's disgusting. Like,
Yeah.
I think at the root of our control is about our bodies and
Yep.
our reproductive rights and our reproductive health. And I just always have, again, I think that's so fundamentally what's broken about our country. We want to control whether you can or cannot have a child, but when you have a child, we don't want to help you. And so I think that, again, the fact that we are fighting for our reproductive rights still in 2021 just tells you, you know what I mean? Like that we have to finish this fight once and for all.
Right, and they keep coming back for more depending on Republican control Congress or the Senate or the White House. It's the one thing they continue to do every time they take control of. Every single time is fighting for our reproductive rights. I have another question. It's 2021 and we still haven't reached gender pay equity. Do you feel like the COVID pandemic might be the push forward we need? What can we do to advance this issue?
I think it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
I and the reason why I say that is because as we design, and I think the school is actually in some ways a model for this, as we design what hybrid working looks like, what I think what is already happening is because women do 86% of the work at home, women are going to say, yes, I want to work from home these 2 or 3 days because I got to do the laundry. I got to take my son to school. Maybe I can save some money on childcare because I can be around. And the men don't have those responsibilities, so they're going to go to work. and they're going to be there for the promotion, there for the opportunity, there for the water cooler conversation, and we're going to be left behind. And because, so, I mean, and we saw the way that this kind of plays out a little bit with parental leave. By calling it parental leave didn't mean that men actually took it.
Mm-hmm.
By offering, again, like unlimited vacations, if you don't have the money to take unlimited vacations, you're not going to take it. And so you're not going to take any vacations because you think you're going to be discriminated against, because we are, as people of color, as seen as like not, what I mean, not committed to our jobs, and we do it. So when we're offering these benefits and these opportunities, how are we offering them equally? And then how are people who are in, again, other industries, what I mean, like retail, education, how are they benefiting from what we think this new normal is going to look like? How are we, again, I think the caretaking discrimination, the discrimination against caretakers, is something that we have to really solve for or address.
Yeah, I often think about the woman who is getting so close to that promotion or possibly landing her dream job. COVID hits, and now she's got to make a decision between going back to work, taking care of perhaps an elderly parent. It might not always be a child.
That's right.
I mean, my mom's 83 years old, and I took care of her as much as I could. But once COVID hit, we really just maintained our distance and cared for her as much as possible. But had she gotten sick, I would have probably had to figure out how to help her and be there for her. And I often see so many of our women that are not only taking care of their immediate family, the husband or the partner or the significant other, a child or two, but they also take care of elderly parents or loved ones. And also that responsibility falls on us. And so I often think about those women that are right at the crust of it all, like just about to get that promotion or about to make that move, right? Land that job that she was waiting for, that she was preparing for. And all of a sudden, just everything's wiped out and she's got nothing to go back to.
And Nury, I mean, one of the things that I think as I've been digging into this that I've really learned that I wasn't, is this idea of how much the fatherhood premium and the motherhood penalty lead to the pay gap, right? So when you are seen as a father in the workplace, you're seen as someone who is worthy of more and someone who is seen as has more time. And mothers are seen as being distracted, not as committed, because we are doing so much more in the home. And it's actually true, right? Meaning like 86% of housework is done by women and young girls. And so you have to change the inequality that is happening in terms of that labor, I think in many ways to influence and affect the pay gap. And so those two things are very interconnected to me. And I think that, again, so many leaders I talked to, like in the Philippines and India these past couple of weeks, it's like when they talk about gender inequality and when they talk about fighting for gender justice, the work that they're talking about is at the work at the home. I mean, they run these PSA campaigns of like, how do you get men to do laundry? It's wild. We don't think of that as like the work that we have to do as feminists. We're so focused on the workplace and creating equality there. But I don't think that anything, and I think COVID was a once in a lifetime opportunity to say, like, where did we lose our minds? We didn't lose our minds at work. We lost our minds at home and because of this homeschooling. That's where it became untenable. And the other piece of this too, it's like, it's not about freeing up time for us at home so that we can just do more work. It's about freeing up time for us so we can go on a walk. You know what I mean? Maybe meditate, maybe take our mothers, you know what I mean? Like do something, take a nap, you know what I mean? Like have some time, space, breath. And I really, really think that like in this country, because it, it's not, this hasn't been a conversation that we have traditionally been open to having or even really been thinking about. Again, our conversation is women in the workplace. Every conversation I do is women in the workplace. And that's where my focus has always been. But I've really been, again, looking at my brothers and sisters, and again, across socioeconomic status. It is whether you are poor or you are rich, if you are a woman, that you're still doing that work too.
Yeah. Here's a fun question for both of us. What are some of the biggest challenges women who run for office face? How can other women support them? Could you share something you went through in your race? Do you want to go first? I got hundreds of those those stories.
Oh my God. So
You run for Congress, right?
ran for Congress and I ran for, I lost twice. I'm like a serial like losing politician. Like give me a race.
Oh,
I when I ran for Congress, I was the first South Asian. I'm not my son. Hi. Say hi.
introduce them.
This is Sean. He's like,
Hi, Sean.
5 minutes.
We're almost done, baby.
My dad is downstairs and I don't want to.
Why don't you lay right there? Lay right there. Go ahead.
I miss those days, by the way. My 12-year-old
say
like,
that.
I don't want, yeah. Yeah.
So I was the first South Asian woman to run. I had no idea how to run a campaign, right? I was running against a Democratic incumbent. I basically did what Ocasio did, except 10 years earlier, but she won and I lost. But I had no idea. And I remember like, we raised like $50,000 from Indian aunties that were just so happy an Indian girl was running. But like, as you know, I swore I was going to win. I was going to shake every hand, meet every voter, do all of that. And I lost spectacularly. But one of the things that I learned from my race was that failure doesn't break you. And like, had I not lost that race, I never would have started Girls Who Code. And then had I not lost my public advocate race, I never would have built Girls Who Code. And so I learned a lot about like, so much about politics is about timing. It's about like whether it is the moment. But I also learned that it doesn't always have to be politics, that you can actually make a lot of change, outside. And that's what I learned, from my race. It's still incredibly hard to run as a woman of color. And I think part of the other, I mean, again, like you said, so many things. I mean, I never listened to myself. I never, like I was trying to wear like my J. Crew suit and sound really smart and like, and I came off so inauthentic. And, it's almost when I let go of politics, do I actually really just be me? And I don't know what it is about, for me, for politics in that arena, that it almost like I feel like they'll never accept me. I know, I'm sorry, I'm getting like super deep in like therapy, whatever, but like.
No, I can completely relate to this. Keep going.
And so it is my cross to bear. Like we all, in my family, we call it like Reshma's ledge. Like the thing every couple of years, like, should I run again? Should I run again? What should, and then something happens. And like, I'm a big believer in God. Right. And like, the universe is like, not yet. But I have this like really romantic view about politics and that you can make a difference and you can change. But I also know that it doesn't have to be politics, that you can make a change outside of the system too. I think with Marshall Plan for Moms, right? It's like, we're like these two sisters working in parallel, right? And like, you need both of us, right? You need somebody on the outside agitating and bomb throwing, and you need in the city council introducing that legislation. And so, yeah. Anyway.
Wow. Well, I have two stories. I was pregnant when I was running for the school board. So before I became elected to the LA City Council 8 years ago, I served as a local school board member on LA Unified School District. And I was about 7 months pregnant when I was recruited to run. I ran, and I remember going before the Democratic Party in my area for their endorsement. And one woman raised her hand. It was a Saturday morning, and I was about 7.5 months pregnant, almost 8 months pregnant, and my husband had driven me to the endorsement meeting. And she raised her hand, and I said yes. And she says to me, you're pregnant. And she had this look on her face, and I said, yeah, I'm pretty pregnant. I'm wobbling in here, trying to do my best, to stay on the campaign trail. She goes, shouldn't you just be better off staying home and raising your baby? And it was like I had to I remember I looked at my husband who was standing by the door, and he was trying to channel me, please don't lose your shit on anybody today. Because I'm hormonal, I'm huge. I'm just like, what kind of question is that? You just set us back 50 years. Are you kidding me? The reason I'm running for the school board is I'm a product of the school system. and I'm about to be a mom, and one of the most important choices you will make in your child's life is where they're going to go to school. And so that's the reason I'm running. And so I had to really just like channel my inner strength, not to just be just absolutely insulted by the fact that she thought I was better off staying home than running for office. That was one example. The second example is I was running for the city council. And if you know anything about my race in 2013, I lost my primary by 19 points. So I wasn't even supposed to be here. Luckily, my opponent didn't get more than 50% of the vote. So we got into a runoff. And so there was a runoff. That's how LA City electorate is structured. So we go into a runoff. And I'm walking every single day. I live in the valley. And if you know the LA, it gets very hot in the valley. It must have been like 115 degrees that summer of 2013. I knocked on someone's door and I'm sweating. My mascara is smearing. I just look, it's humid. I'm just like, I'm a hot mess. And sometimes people just feel sorry for me and open the doors like, do you want a glass of water? Do you want like what's happening? And so I knock on this woman's door, and you know, she's very nice, and we're talking about my platform and what I want to do for the neighborhood and so on. And she said, dear, you know, it's 7 o'clock in the evening. Is anyone home feeding your child? And so I just looked at her. I said, my child? Oh yeah, that's right. I do have a child. She's 4. I said, she goes, I read on your brochure that you're a mom. I said, yes, her name is Isabel, and she's 4 years old. And she goes, well, who's taking care of her? And why aren't you home? And who's feeding your family? Do you have a husband? I think you do have a husband. I read you had, I do have one of those. I do have a husband. I said, if it makes you feel better, and again, channeling my inner strength, I said to her, if it makes you feel better, I made dinner before I left the home. I made spaghetti. It's warm. My husband knows how to work the microwave. And so all he needs to do is put that little dish in the microwave, hit a minute or two, warm it up, and they're going to have dinner. And I'll be home to be able to clean all that up. I'll be able to get home and clean up their mess and wash the dishes. And I was saying this to her, and she just looked at me. She goes, well, you know, I just don't know if you would be a good elected official, because I don't know what your daughter would do without you. And this is in 2013. And so I really had to make a choice. Do I sit here and argue with this woman about why women need to run for office and what kind of policies we need to advocate for and push for, and all the stuff that I believe in, the things I want to fix in this neighborhood that I think only women can advocate for? I mean, I had to just choose my battles and keep going. I won. I was able to turn that election around, and I won. But I will never forget those 15 minutes with this woman who was just so concerned that my daughter didn't have anybody at home making dinner or warming dinner up, and the fact that I did have a husband, that shouldn't be put on him. It should be my responsibility to be there and feed my 4-year-old.
Yeah. Wow. And it's two women, right, who both said that. I mean, it's so, we have so much, you know, but again, I think it's just, I think it's changing. It has to be changing.
I hope so. You know, I often I look back at this last year, and I see what other women in leadership are having to go through. And I've seen women under attack over the last year, especially from the far right, but I also see it from the far left. And I think for those of us who make really tough calls, and we cannot always be 100% with what people want. I mean, sometimes you have to make tough calls. There's tough votes at times, but you try as much as possible to help as many people as possible. And so I just felt that this entire year has been incredibly difficult on women who are leading in positions of power. And the kind of negative pushback that we're getting from men is alarming, and it's something that I think we just need to address. That's the reality of politics and what women have to endure. That it's just, no matter what, you're seeing this avalanche of attacks coming from both sides, and it needs to be called out. I try to do as much as I can, but it's been a difficult year, especially serving in office.
And look, I think on the right, it's like they don't like strong women, and I think on the left, it's like they don't want to do what they need to do to help us.
Right. And that's a great point.
What scares me about this moment is like, you can only ask for so much. And I think if women like you and I are just exhausted, and like, you know, give me anything. Like I got it. Like, you know, it's like we're like Athena. And I think that's why it's so important in this moment to like really fight for like the support that women are going to need, because we want to lead. We want to run the world. You know, we want, and we can do it all our way, messily, but we can.
Well, I want to thank you. I know your baby wants to make sure you put him down, and so I want to give you enough time to do that. But I want to just thank you, Reshma. This has been such an amazing conversation, getting to know you and the things that you care about. I'm just in awe with you and your who you are as a woman and as a role model to us, so many of us. So I want to.
And I hope you do. I just want. I mean, I love you too. Like whatever you do, wherever you go, please count me in as part of your sisterhood. I hope you run for everything and run the state. And I will be here, and we will be here in New York backing you up. So
I appreciate you so much. And with that, I want to also just make sure this is a call to action, that this dialogue does not end here. I want to empower every single person that's listening to this conversation, that they need to go beyond this virtual space. We need to talk to one another, whether you're doing it in public service or at your job, on a corporate board, or anywhere in between. We need to continue to push the envelope, and let's stick together and fight together to make sure that we are standing up for women and women in the workforce, because I'm raising a daughter. I want her to be strong, determined, and be able to go get that dream job, but I don't want her to have to sacrifice her family to get there. Right. And so I just want to give you an opportunity to just say, end us and send us off before we log off, and just wanted to say thank you for allowing us the space and getting to know you. And if you're in Los Angeles, we would love to host you. Anywhere, if you're coming up with a new book, I would love to host something for you here in the city. Just let me know. I haven't traveled at all. I haven't really left Los Angeles over a year, but I love New York. I love everything about the city, but I want to invite you to our city, and just with open arms. You have a friend here. You have an army of women that are ready to receive you. Just let us know when you want to book that flight, and we're happy to host something.
I love LA, so I will definitely be there, and I have now a new friend there. But I just want to encourage every mom out there to go from rage to hope. Like, I know we're angry and I know we're tired, and this is just an enormous opportunity for us to get what we deserve. And so however that means, whether that's signing our petition, whether that is supporting Nury and the incredible work that she's doing in the LA City Council for the martial moms, if it is marching for paid leave or affordable childcare, if it is basically asking your company, well, what are you doing? When women come back to the workforce, how are we rooting out the motherhood penalty? Keep our eye on this, because I think we can shorten the economic recovery for mothers, but we have to keep speaking up. We have to keep using our voice, and we have to keep demanding change.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, I hope that all of you felt that you're not alone. This pandemic has been hard on all of us. I think all we have stories for days, and it's been really, really hard for me, for you, for all of us getting through this throughout this country. And I just hope that this hour was a slight break from your stressful day and your stressful week, and that we can one day be together. So I just want to say thank you so much for being with us this evening. Have a great night, everyone, and stay strong and stay healthy, and let's get through this together. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.